Okay, welcome to KRTD Media Network. I'm your host, the Falcone General, and I'm here with our guest, Larry Sharpe. Please introduce yourself to the audience. Larry?
Hey, how are
Oh,
you?
I was saying, please introduce yourself to the audience.
I am Larry Sharpe. For those of you who want to know more about me, I ran for office in 2018 as a libertarian. I do a cool podcast called The Sharpe Way. If you want more information, please feel free to check out The Sharpe Way or Larry Sharpe. Google it. I'm on all the internet things, and it's Larry Sharpe with an E at the end, and the E stands for entertaining. How about that?
Oh, that's fine. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, what basically got you into politics in the first place, really?
That's an interesting question. I wanted to make impact. I wanted to change things. I actually was considering leaving my state and heading to South Carolina, which is a more friendly state for someone who does what I do, which is I work with a lot of big businesses, and um, and I'm a small business. And I realized how the environment was so much better in North Carolina compared to New York. And so I wanted to make a change. So I got upset and I decided to run for office and try to make a change. That is why I decided to run. But how did I get involved in politics at all? I was actually someone who didn't care about politics much. I was a rebel. I was someone who was, a Nader guy and a Perot guy and the rebel guy.
Yeah.
And then I was very disappointed after Obama. And so I became a I don't care who guy. I didn't really care at all. Um, and then I heard Gary Johnson speak. And when I heard Gary Johnson speak, I thought this guy might be a guy for me. And I looked at libertarians and I became one.
That's like, and that was like a quick story. I was like, I thought it was gonna be like a lot longer, but
No, what does your audience want to talk about? Let's hit a topic that your audience wants to talk about.
oh, I was gonna talk to you about like mostly like some stuff like about like uh I want to talk to you about like basically what got you to run for governor of New York.
That's boring. Your audience doesn't care about that. What's your audience care about? This is a story.
Okay.
If they want my life story, just go on my thing. You'll see my bio. It's fine. It's boring stuff.
Okay.
What does your audience want to talk about? What do they care? Tell me the issue that matters to them. What do they care about?
Okay, I was gonna talk to you about like I was basically gonna talk to you about like empiric like basically the United States like interventionism or being like the world
I
point.
love that. Now that's something we can talk about. I'm in now. I see the Shea picture behind you, so I
Yeah.
got a feeling you're not happy with America jumping
Yeah.
into the Central America.
Yeah.
I bet that will be the case.
Yeah. Cause
So
like
let me walk down that road.
uh
It is my view as a libertarian that good ideas don't require force, right?
mhm,
That's my view. Not everyone agrees with that, obviously, but I do. So I think that what America does well, when it's at its best, which it hasn't been in a long time, but sometimes it is, but rarely is it. When it's at its best, it exports its culture of freedom, its culture of choice, its culture of all the things that I think are great. Its culture of volunteerism, its culture of charity, its culture of innovation, its culture of entrepreneurship. We haven't done that well as much as we should have.
yeah.
That culture is far more powerful than any bomb or any drone strike or any nuke or any Marine hitting the beach or any of those things. So I would like us to not be physically invading or putting pressure on other people. I'd rather just open up trade and trade and trade and trade and trade like there's no tomorrow. I think we should shut down our bases slowly because we have agreements that we have to deal with. And I don't want to put other countries in trouble when we agree to defend them and such. Begin to shut down all of our bases. Take every deal that we have in all of the countries we have in a base, we have a base in. And if there is an opt-out clause immediately, opt out. If there is not an opt-out clause, let them know that when this deal ends, we're not going to renew. Let them know up front, we're not renewing. Set your world up. When our agreement is over, we're out. Because in most of these countries, we either have a
Yeah.
treaty or a status of forces agreement that at one point wears out. Then we
Yeah.
start pulling them out. And as we pull them out, we start increasing trade. I would love to make those bases free trade zones or something like that for people to begin to
Or
swap
basically
ideas.
basically like embassies or something like that, where like diplomats from like that country where the base is, basically come in to basically do like negotiations and stuff
Well,
for
we
like
probably already have an embassy or consulate in that
yeah,
nation already. So the odds of us needing another one, I think, would be slim. But if we
yeah,
need one, I'm happy to do that. But to be forward with you,
okay.
it's their land.
Yeah,
So
true.
I would rather let them have their land. Now, if they want us to somehow pay for it, and because the dollars is what they care about, our leasing fees, I'm fine to create some kind of leasing fee if we're going to make it a free trade zone that we get a cut from. So in
Yeah,
theory, I'd be okay with a free trade zone in theory, depending upon the details, obviously. But it's their
yeah,
land. I want us to walk
yeah,
away from their land.
yeah. I agree. I agree with like some basically like on basically like uh on basically being non-interventionist and stuff like leaving and like with me like learned a lot about the United States do with their interventionist policies like where they had to do like where they did like some proxy war between the Soviets and uh with the Soviets in El Salvador, which caused like a whole
Well,
civil war.
well, what you have to realize is
Yeah.
after World War II, the United States didn't do World War II very well politically at all. We did it relatively well militarily. And that was just overpowering. But when it came to politically, we were terrible at World War II. The idea of creating what we did, which is the idea of unconditional surrender, which was purely an American idea. That was a terrible idea. It made the war last a whole lot longer. It made a lot more people die, and it made negotiating virtually impossible. And it made us have to be allies, strong allies with the Russians, and give the Soviet Union a lot more power than we should have given it. So that politically was a disaster off the bat. But then once it was over, we immediately engaged in a Cold War, Cold War One. And Cold War One was the Soviet Union as senior partner, China as junior partner, and the United States fights proxy wars against them both until basically the 90s, right? We fought proxy wars against both of them until the late 80s, early 90s. And
Yeah.
as we did that, and that was through everything, we fought those proxy wars in Iran, we fought those proxy wars in Vietnam, we fought those proxy wars in everywhere. We fought proxy wars against them
Yeah.
all around the country. And all it did was destroy other countries' worlds, destroy their own economies, destroy their own politics. That was the damage of the proxy wars. Now, the problem is now we actually won Cold War One. America did. It did it
Yeah.
in the way that it knew how. Overwhelming power. We started early off with a big advantage over the Soviets. So, of course, but now we're in Cold War Two. And Cold War Two is now China is the senior partner
Yeah.
and Russia is the junior partner. And we're still fighting proxy wars. But most of those proxy wars now aren't physical. They're either somehow mercantile or they're cyber. And we're fighting cyber wars now with Russia being the junior partner. So we didn't do a good job of winning the peace in any of those wars.
I was also about to say this, like, for example, like I remember there's like a Cold War in the Middle East as well. And like where basically the feud is going around is where now like where China is basically beating them at becoming the number one imperialist power with like trade and their uh basically them going into Africa to start investing into like
100%.
businesses.
The issue
When
you find with the Chinese government in general is the Chinese government is not concerned at all about dealing with warlords, right? They don't mind that. That's a total thing.
yeah,
America, at least ostensibly, pretends to care about dealing with warlords. In reality, we don't either. But but our image has to be that we don't deal with warlords. We won't bribe people. We actually have laws that say you can't bribe. So we have to get around it with different ways. The Chinese just walk in with a bag of money and say, who do we have to pay to build the railroad? Oh, him and him. Okay, here's the cash. Can we build it now? And they go, yeah, go ahead. That's what the Chinese do. We have to
yeah,
jump around things, and it makes it harder for us to compete in that world. And I'm not necessarily against our policies in that necessarily.
yeah. I was gonna say like this, like the other thing is like China, like they fund like Duterte as well as the United States funds Duterte in the Philippines and stuff where basically like Duterte, in my opinion, is like a Ooh, an evil, like a fascist to me, like a fascist dictator. That's like,
There's tons of fascists around. Remember,
yeah.
in internal struggles, when it's an internal
Mhm.
struggle and there is a fascist faction, they almost always win.
Yeah.
Almost always. It's very rare in an internal struggle for fascists to lose.
Yeah.
So, I mean, America has a fascist side to it too, right? I mean, every
Yeah.
nation has, not every nation, but most large nations with any form
Yeah.
of history have a fascist side. I would argue that even China is, if not now, is becoming a fascist state. It was based upon one individual, the history of China becoming great again. So I think you do even China, I think is, if not now, you could see an argument for it moving towards a fascist state. Turkey moving towards a fascist state, if not one already. So I think many around the world, we have it all over the world.
Like, for example, like I was learning this from Sputnik news where I was like learning this where like about the radio, like like the Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, that the radio stations that the United States owns.
Yeah.
Where yeah, I heard this that they literally use like former Nazis for the staff of those places, as well as like like the
Of
head of
course, we still use all those things. The reality of
yeah,
it is, if you want to convert people to whatever you want to convert them to,
yeah,
you want to use people who were former the thing, right? Whatever that thing is, right? And this goes from
yeah,
anything as far as ideology or even addiction, right?
yeah,
Who's going to help the person best who has some form of substance abuse? Someone who in the past has had that same substance abuse. They know
yeah,
what they're going through. They understand their language. They're able to communicate well. If you've got someone who believes that fascism is the right way of doing it, what's the best way of getting someone who's a fascist to be a not fascist? Is getting someone who used to be a fascist to say,
yeah,
hey, look, I was there, man. I get it. I thought the same way you did. Let's have a conversation. And we do that now, even
yeah.
with many Islamic terrorists. We use former Islamic terrorists or imams now, the American government does, to try to turn people who we capture, who we believe are violent terrorists.
like de-radicalization of like basically jihadists. Like I
Mhm.
remember I was learning this where like people like basically here on my side of the left, which is like way to the left of like the mainstream left would see. I'm like a communist,
I can see
where
by the photo, the picture, I
yeah,
can see. Yes,
yeah,
I
I
get
would,
it.
yeah. I was about to say this, like we do I like I've met like
You use
people
the word like a lot,
yeah, I know.
a lot. It's like every other word, man. It's hard for me to concentrate. You use like so much. Oh my
Okay.
God. Please try to concentrate.
Yeah.
I'd rather you like write your
Okay.
question down first then.
So I remember I talked to like former fascists,
Mm-hmm.
like now they are communists.
Mm-hmm.
They convert themselves. And we try like deconverting all like former fascists and
Sure.
bring them more to the left and then radicalize them to the left instead.
I
With
wish you just wouldn't do the radicalized part. I like the deprogramming part. I'm not sure I like the radicalizing part, but whatever, it's fine.
I yeah, I like do some radicalization, not like radicalization where they just do some anarchy all over the place or just like throw a whole
But
like
if you look at the average American, the person who lives in a suburb, say, or right on the border of an urban area,
yeah,
they go to work every day without when there's no COVID lockdowns. They get their kids to school. Can they actually tell the difference in actual practice between a communist and a fascist? And the average American couldn't tell difference. They would hear someone who was radical, they'd be afraid because the average American's afraid of anything radical. The average American is, not all Americans, obviously, but the average American's afraid of anything radical, whether it's radical right or radical left. The average American is afraid of massive change. So
yeah,
this is going to be challenging for any radical left or radical right to make real change in America without it being without there being so much disruption, and then of course so much fear. And afraid Americans is what I'm afraid of. I am worried about afraid Americans, because when Americans are afraid, they do things like Patriot Act. They do things like the war on
Oh,
drugs. They
yeah.
do things like all the things that I can't stand is what
Oh,
afraid
yeah.
Americans do. COVID lockdown, where they lock an entire state down without even having a plan for the unlockdown. I mean, nothing but just, they do nothing but bad things. And this is what I'm worried about when it comes to radicalization. I'm worried about afraid Americans doing bad things. And because of that, actually moving us closer to a dictatorship unintentionally, right? The American people aren't trying consciously to, they're not going, you know, we need a dictator. Well, some are, but most aren't saying that, right?
Yeah.
So most Americans aren't saying that, but they are pushing us towards that oligarchy or dictatorship by their fear.
I was also going to say this, like, I was gonna ask, do you think they're gonna try to make another Patriot Act after that whole incident that happened in the 6th of January?
100% the attempt is going to be there. You see it already, right? The problem we have is you don't, our Congress has basically abandoned any chance of doing anything. It doesn't do anything anymore, right? It yells and screams, and the filibusters stop things. So nothing actually happens, right? So instead, what do? The president creates his own powers, and that's it. And the president, and that now the courts have to become activists because the legislature doesn't do anything. So Biden will make some kind of sweeping executive order, and then the courts will decide if it makes any sense. That's kind of where we are right now. It's embarrassing, but I think that's where we are.
Yeah. As well as, like, I was learning this when I was checking some people's like voting records, like Bernie, for example. Somebody showed me like how like they voted to like rewrite the Patriot Act in 2014, as well as like next, like really like the feds love doing another Patriot Act to basically do a whole police state over
Of
like
course.
all of us. Like it's
This is
like
what COVID did. I'm not sure if people really understand what the response to COVID actually did. In my state, New York, and I know every state wasn't the same, but in my
yeah.
state, California, the largest states, not Florida as much, some in Florida, some in Texas, but clearly in New York and California, literally tens of millions of people had to wake up in the morning and then look and decide, will the government let me go to work? That never happened before. And as a general rule, American people said, yeah, that's fine, because we're scared. That was the reason. Because we're afraid, we will allow the government to put us in a cage. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have decided to stay home. I mean, maybe you should have. I don't know what your world is or what your background is or what your health condition is. But the fact that we didn't even push back, we went, okay, government can do that. That government can say a business can't open anymore, that we can't, that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are no longer valuable. The only thing valuable is how the government decides your life. That's it. Liberty, not required. Pursuit of happiness, not required. We got rid of those last two. And the idea that I own my own life or that you own your own life, that's gone. And that's a problem. That's my biggest issue. What you're saying, Patriot Act, yeah, that's bad too. But this was
Yeah.
far worse.
I was also gonna say this, like, next, the government not giving us any aid. Like, did you see, like, for example, that
Did you say the government didn't give us any aid?
yeah, they like the aid that they gave us was some very well means tested stimulus checks that were like 1,200.
Oh, no. Let me be clear on a couple of things here. The government did give us aid. I'm not happy that they did. But I mean, if they're going to crush us, they got to help us. So I get that part of reciprocity, right? But the point is they did. The problem is they didn't do it the way they, if you're going to do a stimulus package, I get your point, right? If you're going to tell me the goal of this dollars I'm giving out is to stimulate the economy, if that's what you're saying, then if you're going to give $2 trillion or whatever the number is, divide it by the number of adult Americans and write everybody a check. And then we'll all go spend it and do that. But we didn't do that. We made it cronyism. We made sure that our friends got money, that people that we wanted got funded, that local governments got funded, blah, 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 versus saying, oh, we're stimulating. 2 trillion divided by, for the sake of argument, 200 households. I don't know how many households there are. I made it up. 200 million households. Divvy it up. That's 10 grand a piece. There's your check. Have a nice day. We
I
didn't
was
do that.
I was going to say like this business owner in Michigan said like the government gave us like a check of like $20,000 for us to like stay home for like everybody stay home for 3 months. This whole pandemic would have been over and we wouldn't have to be like dealing with trying
That's my point.
like with this whole thing. Like that's like what I totally agree with. And the only aid they gave was like to like all like to like their friends who basically
Yes.
bribe them. They just give it to them like that. Like it's nothing. Like they just let
So
them.
let me ask you, my friend, how is Shay and his crew going to help us out with this then? I think my answer of more freedom is a better answer. It is by no means a perfect answer. I think there is no perfect answer. But you're telling me you're a communist. Okay, my ears are open. Please tell me how a communist would have made this better.
Okay. We would actually just like gave like people aid, basically seize the assets of like the rich people
So
to
just take their
basically
stuff. Okay.
yeah, to basically be able to give the aid to the people, but only like a lockdown for like 3 months, like and give people like 20 or $30,000
So
stimulus check.
let me ask the question if I could then.
Uh-huh.
So you would do something like, and if I'm off or if I'm simplifying too much, please correct me. But here's where my head is. So you're gonna say someone who's rich like a Jeff Bezos, like that rich?
Yeah,
Okay, so you're gonna go to Jeff Bezos and say, "Hey Bezos, you're worth whatever billions. Write the U.S. government a check for whatever 10 billion or whatever is the number, right?" And you're gonna get a bunch of people like that and say, "Write them a check." Is that the way you seize, or do you physically grab the company? Like, does the government take control of Amazon, or does the
like
government say,
na-
"You give me the check now"?
like nationalizing basically nationalizing it, like
So you just
nationalize.
take Amazon.
Yeah, just
Okay,
take
got it. So
yeah.
you go, Jeff, you used to own Amazon. We do now. Now, does Jeff retain any of his own? Does he retain any of his own wealth at that point? Like, does he
So
keep what he has, or do you take that too?
basically keep some of it. Like he's just gonna
So
keep like his
who decides how much he keeps? Is that like a Congress thing? Does Congress make a law that says when we take
well,
your company, you get 50%?
it would basically be like mediated between government officials and like Jeff Bezos himself,
So
really.
Bezos is going to try to fight for how much of his own money he can keep.
Yeah, he's gonna be
Okay,
like,
no, that's where you're going. I got it. What if Jeff Bezos says no? What if
we're
his
doing
workers say no?
we're
What if he?
basically
What if his workers say, "I don't trust your government to run this company. You're going to run into the ground." I'm not saying they would say that, but what if they did? What if Bezos goes, "I'm not letting you take my company. No, you can't have it."
oh, we're still gonna nationalize it anyways. We're gonna be
Oh, so he's
like
just going to jail.
basically just like
Okay,
nationalize.
no. So he's going to jail.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the people who don't want to work for Amazon anymore, who get mad and say this is going to, they lose their jobs, or do they go to jail too?
No,
Because it's nationalized now.
they basically still would like keep their jobs anyways.
No, they don't want their job. They don't want to work for the government. They want to go off and start a competition because they don't think you're going to run the government well. So his senior staff, once you arrest Bezos, his senior staff is going to leave because they're going to free. They're going to get. So they're either going to go to the country or they're going to start a competitor. So when that happens, I'm assuming you're going to seize most of their assets because they're also wealthy. So you'll seize a bunch of their assets. So does that mean that they'll go to jail too?
For basically evading taxes as well.
Okay.
Yeah, to take their resources as well.
So a lot
And
of people going to jail in your world.
only
Just
rich
saying, a
people,
lot of people going to jail in your world.
except really like the small business owners really we would
But they
like
rely on Amazon right now.
because like Amazon really is like a monopoly
It
and I
is. This is true. I agree.
basically break we basically break it up, nationalize it, and then like start putting those like you know how for example basically use those profits to actually like give like people like aid, like for
Yeah,
example.
but hold on. Let me go down this road now with you. So you decide you put Bezos in jail, you seize his assets, you nationalize the company,
Mhm.
and you start writing checks to the American public. Hey, you guys are in trouble. Here's checks. You start writing checks. Amazon eventually is going to start drying up, right? There's only so much you can pull off of Amazon before it begins to dry up. So
Yeah.
does that mean you then just use the Fed to print more money to give out checks?
No, we're not gonna be like that. As well as like the other thing I also was gonna say, like for example, like with Alaska under Sarah Palin, she nationalized like the oil industry where she's like able to give like her citizens like $1,000 checks off of the nationalized profits off of the oil industry there.
Yeah, but that's been that way in Alaska for a very long time.
Yeah,
And yeah, so yeah,
I,
but the actual industry, the actual people who are doing the work are still private companies.
yeah, I I also forgot to say this, like the other thing is like next, I forgot to mention this with it, like as well as taking the money, we would also like put it into other programs like universal health care, as well as like rebuilding like infrastructure, because like for example like
I no, I love what you're saying. You're going to put it someplace else. I don't mind any of that stuff. I don't mind the idea of you putting
yeah.
it in someplace that you think is right.
Mhm.
My worry is you're literally going to arrest and put a whole bunch of people in jail. And if I'm wealthy, right? If I'm wealthy, I'm not. But if I was wealthy and I saw you to Jeff Bezos, here's what I guarantee you I'm doing. I'm taking all my wealth and I'm leaving. That's what I'm doing, right? If it's me, if all of a sudden you're like, okay, Bezos, give me your stuff or you're going to jail. I'm like, okay, pack my stuff. I guess I'm a Canadian citizen now. I mean, I'm going to be like that. I'm going to pack across, change my name to Les Sharpe, and I'm moving to Quebec.
It reminds me of like, I think this was like mentioned before, like capital flight.
Yep.
Is that the word you're talking about? Like example you're making, like capital flight.
Yep.
So basically, like since you can't like move like a total factory or like a warehouse there,
Yep.
basically we'd take those abandoned warehouses and then literally make them into worker cooperatives where it's like publicly owned, and use those to
I
basically.
love the idea, but here's the biggest problem you have with communist thought now. The biggest issue, I think, there are two of them, but the one that no one's the one most communists don't care about is the force part. That part bothers me, but most communists are okay with that. The other part to worry about is it is a thought process that heavily comes from the industrial age. And while factories do matter and they are important, there's no doubt. What is far more important in the post-industrial age is intellectual property. That's far more valuable. So the question is, do you then seize intellectual property? And if you do that, you can, but then you wind up becoming like China, and you might become in the marketplace at one point a pariah, because then no one else can retain intellectual property. You'd be basically saying international intellectual property doesn't exist. And in the long run, that might be a good thing in the long run. But imagine how much disruption you'd have internationally if, again, Bezos or whomever, Bill Gates or whoever the leaders of the world pack up and leave and go someplace else and say, hey, American co-ops, you can't use our intellectual property. And you go, I don't care, I'm doing it. Like China has done in the past, right? I don't care, I'm just doing it. That's even more disruption. Do you not see the problem with that? I'm not saying it can't be done, but do you see a problem with that?
Uh, Here's the thing, like I don't think there would be a problem by like taking those like abandoned factories and warehouses and using them to
Okay.
basically manufacture goods and stuff. But
Okay.
like China, in my opinion, they stopped being communists under like the Deng Xiaoping regime, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
because under Deng Xiaoping, he just started becoming more of a friend to the United States and started letting in all these private enterprises
And
in.
haven't you seen that as a common thing? This is what happened in Sweden as Sweden became more a bit more socialist and issues like that. They had trouble, so they started going back more towards a more market in the 80s, 90s. You see that happen in China too. You see it happening in many countries, right? That when they implement the socialist slash communist to the best of their ability, it tends to not do as well, and it tends to fall back into the same ideas, which is humans are humans.
I was about to
So please go
say
ahead.
about this. Basically, what happens to like former socialist experiments, like
Mhm.
they are under siege. For example, like Cuba, it's
Yep.
an embargo. Like they are under siege where
Yep.
now they're going to have to capitulate and trying to basically keep it alive. And now they are capitulating and turning into a social democracy because they're under siege and they have barely anybody to trade with at all because of them like nationalizing their industries and basically
Mhm.
becoming like when they were like a socialist country. They stopped being
No,
socialist.
this is a valid argument I hear often, and it's a valid argument that many socialist experiments have not been able to come to fruition because the outside world has made them pariahs and or trade embargo them. I think that's true.
Yeah.
It's a valid argument.
Do, do you like I think they would thrive if they weren't embargoed and basically having to be under siege. Where, for example, like I'm a defender of like the DPRK or what we know as North Korea, where like they are embargoed to and forced to isolate themselves entirely from the world.
So hold on. You're a supporter of that because, to be clear,
Oh,
I'm just going to be clear. You're saying that you think it is a good government. Is that what you're saying when you say supporter? I want to understand what you mean by supporting.
I mean a defender. Like I defend them from like Western media lies that I hear a lot about the DPRK or North Korea. Like I
Well,
hear,
that's a part of it I agree with, right? I don't think we should be, I don't think we should be at all having an embargo against them or stopping them or punishing them. I'm with you. I think we should let them be who
yeah,
they want to be.
yeah, like let them be who they want to be. Like let them choose like their own system if they want. Like
Sure.
it's up to them. Like and yeah, like literally like the only reason why they even have nukes in the first place is because US aggression because what was
I
it?
agree again with that too. I think that's
Yeah,
why the Iranians are trying to get it. I'm with you.
yeah,
My concern is it's difficult for me to support a government that is basically a monarchy who believes in that they have a god king. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this.
uh
The original leader of North Korea, Kim Il Sung, is still officially their head of state,
I was about to
even though
say
he's been dead for decades.
I was about to say this, like with Kim Il Sung, like the Kim family has been like losing some power where I found out this, like the only like he could basically be kicked out of power if by like the people because people forget like there's a thing where they can recall the politicians whenever the hell they want, where
In North
like
Korea.
yeah, in the DPRK they
So
can do
so hold on. So you're telling me, I'll be clear on this. You're telling me that
they
if
can
the people decide to recall the God King, they can recall the God King.
yeah,
You
they
live in
could
a you live in a fantasy world, my friend. You
no
live in a
no
fantasy world. You
hey
live in a fantasy world. That's a fantasy. That's like just
wait
some shit you just made up. There is
wait
I don't that's the same thing as them saying, Larry, there's a law. If people decide you can just fly to the moon tomorrow.
I,
Okay, great. There's a law that I can fly to the moon tomorrow. I can't fly to the moon tomorrow.
I was about to say this. Like, I was learning this. I found was learning about like democracy in the DPRK, where I heard this. This is where they had their last election in 2019 on March 10th, where it was like over 600 seats were up for were up for the election where there's like three parties, and one is like the Workers' Party, the other one's the Social.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going. So you're saying
They have
democracy, local elections within North Korea.
there's not just local elections. There's like a
I
full
see.
general assembly.
Yeah, no,
Like,
no. I think that's true, and I'm with you. There absolutely is. But I'll be forward with you. I'm gonna go to Godwin's law. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna go to Godwin's law, and I'm gonna
it's
go
fine.
to Nazi Germany. Godwin's law says everything eventually goes down to Nazis. So I'm just gonna follow Godwin's law and go right to the Reichstag. During Nazi Germany, people don't realize Nazi Germany was a democracy. It was a democracy, and people still voted, and there was still a Reichstag. It existed. In Imperial Japan, Imperial Japan was a democracy. I mean, there were elections. It had happened, but practically neither neither had the population in neither country had any actual control over their supreme leader. In reality, it had none. And I would say in North Korea, while I'm sure people elect local and even national, I'm sure there's I mean, I don't know, but I believe you, and I would totally believe that there was actual elections and some parliamentary or congressional system. Nobody's getting rid of the Kim family except through force or act of nature. That's the only way they get rid of the Kim family. And to think anything else is not understand what that is. That is a monarchy. It is basically a constitutional monarchy, is what it is. That's what that actually is in practice.
I was about to say, with the whole thing, like there is a cult of personality over the Kim family in the
Yeah.
DPRK
Yeah.
because like World War II and the Korean War were
Yeah.
like they fought off against the imperialists, which were Japan and
They
them.
didn't fight them off. They didn't. That's not true.
They they with the help of the Soviets, like for
Thank you.
example,
The Soviets did. Yes.
yeah, they basically they formed like resistance groups, like guerrilla groups, as well as they joined the Communist Party of China to fight off the Japanese with the aid of the Soviets. Like, oh my God, like the Soviets were able to destroy the Japanese in Manchuria in like 3 weeks. Like,
Come on, no. See, this is now you're listening to propaganda. That's a bunch of horseshit. The Russians didn't fight the Japanese in World War II until the very end of the war, where the
yeah,
Japanese were
like
completely devastated. It's
it
like what do they wait till we drop the bomb and then they attack Manchuria? I mean, come on. That we had already taken half of the empire. We had fought them. The Germans were already surrendered. I mean, to give the USSR any credit in beating the Japanese in World War II is
I was about to
complete
say,
fantasy.
basically this is what before like the A bomb, before we dropped the A bomb, then like the Soviet Union was like well, like last to declare war on Japan, and then
Yeah,
invading Japan, they were able to take down Manchuria
yeah,
and get back against them in like 3 weeks tops.
yeah.
And
Me and you could have done that in 3 weeks. That's how bad the Japanese army was in Manchuria at that time. They weren't even getting food deliveries. Literally, me and you, we could have came up with a stick and said, "Hey, Japanese, surrender." They'd been like, "Okay, it's not impressive. I'm sorry, it's
like
not impressive."
they had like like I was checking like the military stats of it of the USSR, and they had like oh my God, like tons of tanks, like so more tanks than like the
Yes,
German.
because America had been giving them money for years during World War II.
Wait,
So much to the point that there was a saying in Russia that an attractive or well-built woman, a good-looking woman, they would call them like, oh, that woman, that's like a Studebaker. They would actually call the woman an American named vehicle because there were so many American trucks in the Soviet Union because we had sent so many over there to help fight the Germans.
yeah,
So yeah,
basically,
the war
yeah,
in the West was over. So they took all that crap in the West and they went to the East. This is not impressive, man. I don't know what you're talking. This is not impressive.
I was
It's not
about
impressive.
I was about to say this when I was like learning my World War II history, like this is what I found. Basically the Americans giving aid like happened later, and then basically when Stalin started basically beat them in like the Battle of Stalingrad, they started pushing the Germans all the way back from off of Soviet land all the way to Berlin, where they basically took the capital and half of like
All right,
Germany.
let me give you some actual history, and I don't mean to be flippant here, but I just
Yeah,
mean to be
I
very
know.
clear. If you've
It's
heard of the Murmansk convoy, that was the convoy that we were sending goods to Russia through. I think it was Archangel, or actually the city Murmansk. There's a city
yeah.
up north in
I
Russia. We
was,
were literally sending stuff since like 41, like early on. Stalingrad didn't happen until the winter of 42, 43. So we had already been doing that. And when Stalingrad happened, you know why Stalingrad happened? Because Mongolian troops came in. Why could Mongolian troops come in? Because they weren't fighting the Japanese. That's why the Eastern armies of Russia were able to ignore that, because they weren't fighting the Japanese, because they were afraid to fight the Japanese, and they moved the Mongolian troops towards Stalingrad. Those are the troops that came in and made that happen. The reason why the Soviets took Berlin was because Delano Roosevelt was incompetent and allowed them to, because he wanted to share Germany and split up their spheres of influence. Oh my God, was that stupid? That just made things worse for the German people. What he should have done is just taken over Germany. If you look at the Germans in 1944 and 1945, 2/3 of the German army was fighting in Russia, not against us, was fighting against the Russians. Many of the German leadership still believed that they could negotiate with the Allies to turn and fight against the communists. They believed that. Obviously, they were wrong, but they still believe that. This idea that the Russians were good guys, they were not in any way. They were not super strong. They
wait,
got their asses kicked. You know the death rate from Russia to Germany? 12-1. 12 Russians were killed for every one German. It was killed and captured. It was embarrassingly bad.
basically when it came to like the Soviet Union versus like the Germans, like I remember literally they wanted like the ally. They basically, for example,
Who's
like
they?
the allies, I was saying, then
Okay.
they and so like first, like the reason why, like I remember I was learning this, like the reason why Stalin did the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was to buy time for industrialization, and he tried to get like Britain and France to do some like
Do
anti-fascist
you
alliance.
do you not hear what you're doing?
Wait,
All
I was
you're doing is every time I say something, you're going to say, let me tell you something else I learned that's cool about Soviets. And then I say, well, that's not really true. And you go, well, there's something else I learned that's cool about Soviets. Well, that's not really true. Well, there's something else I learned that's cool about Soviets. Let me do this and do that. I mean, you can if you want to. If you want to love the Soviet Union, you can. I'm just saying that to say that they were so much better than anyone else, I no, I'm not gonna make them a race of super uber mention
oh
to make that a thing. They're just not. It was another cult of personality, first around Lenin and then Stalin. And it never, after Stalin, there was no real personality that they could do anything. It was based upon a cult of personality. It was doomed once Stalin died. And Stalin was ruthless. He was brutal, responsible for tens of millions of people that they would murder. He didn't mind throwing people to meat grinder. If you know how Stalingrad worked, which you brought up Stalingrad worked because he purposefully made Stalingrad a meat grinder, not just for Germans, but also for Russians. He just threw people into that meat grinder and watched them get chewed up while he brought Siberian troops across from the east. And that's how he won that battle. Not because the Soviets were so smart or so awesome or so amazing. It's because they simply had more forces at that time and purposely created a meat grinder. And the Germans simply couldn't take the same number of the Germans couldn't take the same number of casualties the Russians took. And in Korea, same thing, Chinese. One of their sayings was, literally one of their sayings, the enemy doesn't have as many bullets as we have bodies. That's not amazing. That means you don't care about life. That means you don't mind creating meat grinders in war. It's not like the Democrats are anti-war, but they don't create meat grinders like that. Only fascists and communists and dictatorships create meat grinders. Democrats tend not to.
I also want to say this, like I got some things like about information. I got some documents where I was saying this like about that death count when it came to like the Stalin era, for example. Like
Here we go.
here's the thing: people literally have like a hard time trying to figure out if it was like over 40 or it was up to 3 or 8 million people. Really, that's like people.
I know
Literally.
that would make him a hero if it was only 8 million. What a hero.
Wait, I was about to say that. Next, I also got like a
You're like,
thing I
so
could.
is he a mass murderer or a super mass murderer? That's not really a good thing. I mean, I don't, whichever one is correct. Okay, so let's say it's exaggerated and it's only 8 million. That's still really bad.
Yeah, I know. I was about to say, like, the casualties really from there basically were from like World War II because like holy crap, like the
Oh, they were
Russians
from World War II. Okay.
yeah, the Russians like lost a lot of people when they were fighting in World War II and good people as
It's
well.
true. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree completely. Yes.
yeah.
So let me, I know we went way off on World War II and the Soviet Union's awesome, I guess. Okay. So you want to make America similar to the Soviet Union or similar to China, similar to Russia, to the North Korea, where similar to Cuba? Where is the place where you would like to see America go if you could find? And I know it can't be exact. I don't want to hold. I'm not. This is not a gotcha question. I know it can't be exact, but if you had to find a close model where you want America to be close to, is there one that exists, or have we not gotten there yet?
I think we would basically it would be like us having to like develop our own way of doing it, and basically from communists we would have to take like examples and parts from those countries to adapt it into America really when it
So
comes
give me one of the good parts that you want to adapt from any of those countries. What's a
basically
good part from Russia? I'm sorry, from Soviet Union or communist China, or well, I guess pre-Deng Xiaoping China, because you don't like modern
yeah
China. So
now
from that China or Cuba, whatever, what would be a piece that you would grab that you would say, yeah,
oh, yeah.
this works?
I would say I would grab the Cuban healthcare system.
Healthcare system. Okay.
Yeah, and take from Mao's China, the People's Commune, and from the Soviet Union, basically the education as well. I remember this as well from East Germany, their education system. Literally, Finland copied and pasted East Germany's education system
Mm-hmm.
to their education system when they were asked, like, where did you get this good education system?
Yep. No,
Yeah,
the Prussian systems in general have been very effective.
yeah. And
Even
that's
the modern American military system is based off a Prussian model.
yeah. As well as like those are like elements I would take and put it into America.
So, do you believe, and it's okay if you don't, do you believe that good ideas require force, that people need to be forced into good ideas? Or do you think that people will pick up and adapt good ideas on their own in general?
I think we can adapt them and like
So, would you be okay with an idea that says, hey, I'm government guy, whether governor or president or in Congress, and I think the current model that's in Finland, that's a really good education system. Why don't we adopt that in, say, I don't know, Connecticut or in a certain place? Because Finland only has 5 million people. So it's not a very big country. We have 330 million. And Finland is one of the most homogenous societies on the planet. We are the least homogenous society on the planet. So why don't we try to put it in one state or one area? Why don't you guys begin to adopt it? And as a federal government, what I'll do as, say, president or Congress or whatever, if a state wants to adopt it, I will make you immune from federal regulatory bodies for, I don't know, 10 years, whatever. Something like that. Would that be a type of thing that you'd be okay with? Or no, do we have to make it nationalized and we got to make a national system?
I would first say this would be in the experimental phase where it would have to do like we would see the example in like one state, like let's say like put it in like Rhode Island, basically see that example and look at the statistics and try doing it from another region as well to see like
But what if the demographics and socioeconomic status of Rhode Island, I don't know this, I'm making this up, but for the
yeah
sake of argument, it is very different than, say, Maryland. For the sake of argument. Again, I don't know if that's true. What if it's very different? And Maryland says, look, it's not going to work here. We have different age groups, different demographics, different ethnic background. It's not going to work with us. We have different culture in our school system. Again, I'm making that up. I don't know if that's true, but for the sake of argument, do you still put it there anyway?
Yeah, I would say, hey, we would have to see if it works in the state first, not like first to see like if it's going to work in the state. Like
So then who decides? Is there still a president in your world who makes a decision? Is the president removed and we only do things through Congress or some form of legislature?
All right. There is like a president. It would basically, like in communist world, it would be called like a general secretary, but
Sure. Right.
there would still be a president and there would still be governors and basically a assembly, like a general assembly, really, as like in other countries. And really,
So they
basically,
vote and they decide. So these people at the federal level, they vote and they go, should we impose this upon Maryland or not? And if they vote 51% yes, Maryland gets it. Is that how that works?
I was gonna say like we were gonna put like a referendum if they wanted like this in the first place. Like for example, like how ranked
Oh,
choice
so
voting.
so Maryland gets to decide if they want it or not.
Yeah, they can decide. Basically, the states would have to like decide if they want it or not entirely, like through referendum, public
But that's not
referendum.
how Finland works, is it?
Basically, I said like Finland copied and pasted the education system on.
Yeah, but
their
Finland didn't give their individual provinces the ability to opt out, did they?
I don't know. Oh, because I'm not.
I know East Germany. East Germany did not give their provinces the opportunity to opt out. That I'm sure of.
Yeah, I know.
So why are you giving us an opportunity to opt out?
Oh, basically, basically, really, it would be up to like the states, and really, it would be an experimental phase, really, when it comes to our
So
transition.
this one doesn't require force for you. So this one you're okay being voluntary.
Yeah, like as well as like for example, like
Because teachers unions may not want it, as an example. Private schools surely would fight against it. The wealthy wouldn't want it unless they could opt out, right? I mean, if I'm wealthy and I put my kid in a private school, I'm not going to want the East German system or the Finn system unless I, as the wealthy, get to still put my kid in private school. Now, if you're going to give me a two-tiered system, I'm in. Let all the plebes go to the government schools, and us rich people, us people, will put our kids in private schools. Is that what you're saying? Would the wealthy still be able to put their kids in private schools?
basically, I think there would not be like a need for private schools in general. Like I think it should be like
So you
public.
think you're going to get the wealthy people to believe that their kids should go to school with poor kids? They're going to believe that.
Yeah, basically, for example, like we do like right with our system, like school segregation, where like we put the rich people into the private schools while we put the poor people, basically put the poor people in the public schools that are underfunded.
What I'm getting at is I know you're saying what's wrong, and I get what's wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with you what's wrong. I think we're on the same page with that. I'm asking you, you're saying, if I get you right, that the answers to the problems that we both agree upon, we agree on the problems.
Yeah.
We are simpatico on the problems.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, how do we solve it? And what I feel from you is you're saying, we'll just force people to do stuff my way. And my way is going to be by, having some kind of parliamentary system where people will vote. And if democratically we vote to do the thing, everyone does it. And the wealthy will just shut up and take it. We'll take Jeff Bezos's company. We'll take his money, and the wealthy can't go to private schools anymore. They'll go to the public schools that we deem appropriate. And then I also just say, well, we'll give people a choice in individual states. Well, to be forward, I mean, what would you do? And I mean, that's very simple. Say, for example, you were very wealthy and your kids were now in private schools with people who are also wealthy, and the odds of your kids getting ahead really shoot up because you're in these private schools with these private environments. And now you live, for the sake of argument, again, is in Connecticut. And they decide to impose this, no more private schools. We're all going to public schools. But in Massachusetts, you can go to your private school. and your private school, which is physically being shut down and or taken over physically by the state in Connecticut, would just move to Massachusetts. Wouldn't you go there too? If it was you, isn't that what you would do?
No. Oh, because like here's the other thing. I'm in like
You would
public
just stay there and put your kids into a school that you don't want, while many of your friends and family would move to Massachusetts and put their kids in those other schools.
basically here, like I like public school, like I go to public school and like
Mm-hmm.
I know it's like underfunded and all, but like public school, I've been able to excel personally. I know I'm not gonna represent everybody who went to public school, but I've actually been able to excel in public school personally because with public school, like public schooling would be so much better if we were able to basically put more funding into public schools and
So let
paying
me give you an example of what you just said. One, you
yeah,
didn't answer my question, which is okay. I know because you don't have an answer. No worries. But the second piece, you're saying lots of money. New York State puts in $28,000 to $29,000 per kid into schooling. I think it's the number one, if not number two, in the entire country. I think it's number one in the entire country. When you rank our schooling, by any way you rank the schooling in New York State, maximum cash that can be done in New York State compared to every other state. At best, we rank 25th. At worst, we rank 37th. I cannot see in any way, shape, or form how more money equals better schooling. I don't see that anywhere. I don't see more money equaling more schooling. I see better systems equaling better schooling. That's what I see. So my worry is if you look at what you're saying and you decide, well, schooling should be better. I agree. Again, on the problem, we agree.
yeah.
What I'm saying is I can't see your solution working.
Basically, like we don't agree on like the solution
Correct.
on schooling or
Correct.
that. Yeah, I get that. I get if you like don't
Correct.
agree with me on the basically on the solution.
Yep.
If you have like a better solution on it, like it's totally fine with me if you disagree with me on these solutions.
I just want to let you know. I think we're agreeing on the actual problems, right? What I said in New York State to do was to instead make sure that every single school district, whatever it is, simply submits at a certain time period, whatever makes the most sense financially, how many kids are in the school district, signed up in the school district. Then the state itself, New York State, writes a check to that school district. There's your money. That's the money you get. Now you might say, well, Larry, how is that good or bad? Well, first off, now I don't have people petitioning for more money to the state, which encourages crony capitalism, which encourages Hunger Games. But second, if you decide you don't want your kid to go to school A, you can just put them in school B. It doesn't matter because the money follows the child. Wherever your child goes is where the money goes. But then, Larry, some of the poorer schools, people leave the poorer schools. Yeah, but then they'll just go to better schools. And if the poorer schools don't get better, they'll lose literally all their people, which means that school will shut down on its own. They have to rebuild the school. That will happen naturally. That's how it will happen. It's choice. People will be able to choose on where to go. Teachers will go to better schools because they can. Schools with more kids in it will probably have better teachers in it. Or there might be certain specific schools that will begin to specify on them. Like have in New York City right now, relatively successful in New York City, you have a lot of high schools that are very small. Why? They're seriously specialized high schools, and people want to go to that specialty. You want to be a doctor, you want to be an engineer, you want to be a so-and-so, you would create specialized schools. But I don't require any centralized control from that. I simply can allow the people to pick what they want to go to. If nobody in your county cares about, you would have engineering, I can't see that happening, but if that were to happen, then there wouldn't be many engineering schools in that county, but there'd be tons in the county, next door, the county after that. And you could send your kid wherever you wanted to. But more importantly, if the schools want more students, they would find ways to transport them. They would find ways to have childcare for them, because they would be incentivized to bring more kids to their school. So now the schools themselves, school districts, not schools, school districts. So districts would be competing against other districts to be a better school to support people effectively, to keep the right teachers. This is a system I think is far better and doesn't require force. And there would still be a testing piece that would see what would work and what would work. And if we happen to come across voluntarily the Finnish method or the East German method, if that happened on its own, Well done. Then we move to that system on our own over time. Generally speaking, and there are exceptions, but generally speaking, as if we all have the right goal in mind, if we have diversity of thought with unity of purpose, we tend to get the best outcomes.
I see. Wait,
So, my friend, it is 3 p.m. in my world. I'm gonna have to run.
Hi. It was nice talking to you, and it was nice to actually meet you for the first time.
I do exist. See,
Yeah.
I do exist.
Yeah, it was great having a conversation with you. I gotta go as well.
There we go. So,
Leonard, are we
thank
still
you,
live?
God. Thank you for letting me have a piece of your audience this afternoon. I hope
Say,
some
Larry,
people care.
I saw the
Go ahead.
debate was very interesting. I want to debate you too. I'm actually to the right of Falcone, so I think we could have an. I'm on the left, but I'm to the right of Falcone, so I think we could have an
Yeah.
interesting debate too.
I love it. 100%. And for any of your audience who cares, feel free to check out my show, The Sharpe Way. Check it out on all the internet things. And of course, check out Larry Sharpe, all the internet things. I'm happy to have you guys aboard. Watch my show if you like. And my show's live also. You can text. I actually answer the chat. So
Yeah.
enjoy, guys.
Hi. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching KRTD Media Network and the International Workers Movement podcast as episode 5. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow Larry Sharpe on YouTube, The Sharpe Way with Larry Sharpe. And we'll see you next time.